Hello everybody and welcome to Color Theory for Digital Arts, the ongoing online workshops with the Creator Space project. So just want to welcome everyone to today's session, and if you haven't joined us before, I just want to thank all our partners in this project. So my name is Tom Strand. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space project. It's a mobile digital arts lab, and we're here we are, ongoing discussion and workshops in creative concepts. And today we'll be looking at color theory for digital arts and what that means. So I just want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and then we have our library partners. We have the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Now at these library partners, we have set up computer labs with all the same software that you're going to see today. And it's available to you at no cost. All you need is a library membership or access through your county interlibrary system as well. So again, these computers are located at those three library partners. They are iMacs with the 27-inch iMacs with at least 32 gigs of RAM per computer. We have solid-state drives and RAID drives, so super fast for editing, and they're loaded with the software. So today's software, we're going to be looking at the Affinity Photo software, and we're also going to be looking at Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve, and there's a free version that you can download and use on your home computers or laptops, and there's also the studio version that goes beyond the 4K limits and adds a whole bunch of extra filters and soundings and all that kind of stuff. But those are, again, the studio is available at all the library partners, so we have that software there. So yeah, thanks for joining us. And so today we're going to look at some really interesting ideas, and this is a kind of our mixed media, mixed areas of digital arts. We're going to look at how what color theory means for digital arts in general. And the idea here is that this is digital arts and the color theory really stems in understanding image manipulation and how image capture and what we can do with the images after. And this is the cool thing about digital imaging, because it's a little bit different than printing and painting and things like that. So things behave a little bit differently in this idea of the digital arts world. So we're going to look at color science in image and digital arts. Then we're going to look at color temperature in video and photography, tone and mood with color. Then we're going to do some hands-on demonstration, post-processing concepts in photography using the Affinity Photo program. Then we're going to look at post-processing for video, aka color grading, and you might have heard this term, color grading, and that's going to be in the Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve studio software. Then we're going to look at some overall adjustments, what it means like for tone, saturation, brightness. So we'll hear different terms, and I think what's really great is that by demonstrating these, we will be able to understand what these terms mean better, because I can say brightness, but what does that really mean and what does it do to the image? And we're going to see this demonstrated right hands-on directly. So yeah, let's get right into the color science idea. So color science, so video, and this will be video photography I should say, uses red, green, and blue colors to make up all types of colors. So this is a little bit different than paint and printing, where we have the idea of CMYK, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And here we have red, green, and blue. And this is what creates the images, RGB. So, and again, there's a little bit of, with photography, once you get into printing, yes, then you can go into CMYK, you can work in that area. But we want to look at RGB, red, green, blue, because the sensors, like for example, what you're watching me on right now, this video sensor is capturing me with the image sensor is red, green, and blue sensitive. So it's taking red, green, and blue light, capturing samples of it, and then there's different sample areas. So usually it's something called 4-2-2. So there's like a 4 of one color dominant, and then it resamples the other two at 2 and 2, and then creates a 4-4-4. So you'll hear that term sometimes. So 4-4-4 means it's uncompressed, full pixels for the sensors in all red, green, and blue areas. 4-2-2 means that two colors are being subsampled, if you will. So that's something of interest, but it's the science that allows us to then put those colors together and make all the colors. How does that work? this is how it works. So you can see right here, we got red, green, blue. And in between that, the red and green combined can create yellow. And green and blue can create cyan. And red and blue can create magenta. So there we are, back to the cyan, magenta, and yellow. So that whole idea. And, and everything in between. So from yellow, we can create the yellow-green. From blue, we can create the blue-cyan or turquoise idea. And then we can get into magenta and then into red. So magenta being purplish, cyan being kind of, green-blue, and yellow adding that kind of warmth, right? And then the whole thing is, once we understand this color science area, then image manipulation in video post-processing, photography post-processing, is just about adjusting things in the opposites. So if there's, let's say, too much red, we adjust things away from the red, so towards the cyan. If there's too much cyan, we do the opposite. We add more red. So it's just this push and pull of adding opposites to reduce areas. So it's really intuitive. So if you think about, hey, there's too much green, we don't add more green, we have to reduce green. So we're pulling away from the green in the direct opposite direction. But we can choose a few paths. We can go more to magenta, but we can also go more to red, and that's reducing the green, but adding some more red. So this is the whole idea, is that when you're reducing one, but technically you start to add another opposite, right? So those opposite ideas. So this is the same thing. If, let's say, skin tone is very yellow, then you start to go to blue, but then you might get into too much blue. So we're trying to neutralize, and what you're seeing me today is a pretty neutral image. So and we'll get into this color temperature idea, but the neutral image that I shouldn't be looking too yellow. I don't have too much blue, so I'm a pretty neutral image. That idea, but I can change that in post-processing and make myself blue. And then you can be like, oh, that looks really cold in his studio. There's a lot of cool look, but I'm just doing that in post-processing. And that's the really cool thing about, once you understand color science, color theory, what you can do to it in post-processing and how that can work. Okay, so let's move on. So color temperature, I just touched on that. Color temperature is really interesting. So it's measured in Kelvin units. And so you hear like degrees Kelvin. So we get this idea because tungsten light bulbs and candles, essentially, they're on this warmer spectrum, 3,200 degrees Kelvin. It's kind of that standard area that we like to say is, tungsten light bulbs. Tungsten light bulbs are your everyday light bulbs that we've been accustomed to for many decades. And the idea was that they replaced candles and gas lights with that same warmth. So they were balanced at 3,200 degrees Kelvin. In more recent times, daylight and the sun is measured at 5,600 degrees Kelvin. And this was a very common thing in terms of when you were shooting and using an analog film format, so still photography or film, you had to figure out if you're going to use film that is daylight balanced or tungsten balanced. And then you would do different filtration to make sure that the images look neutral in them. So if it was daylight balanced, that means I'm using that film to shoot outside. So it's balanced for 5,600 degrees Kelvin, bluer. Now what happens is if you take that daylight film and you shoot inside, then it looks bluer, because inside traditionally you have more tungsten light, yellow light. So interior lighting would make that very blue. Now if you take tungsten and you bring it outside, then it's on the warm side, so then it's going to look a bit warmer outside. And then people intentionally use the wrong balanced film stocks to create different looks. So outside, using tungsten, and you get this kind of bluer look, which can be really neat. So understanding that is really important. Now we still have this concept, so we still have to figure out our cameras, photo cameras, video cameras, which color temperature we want to use. So right now you're watching me on a daylight balanced video image. So I have that at 5,600 degrees Kelvin. I have windows over here that are bringing in 5,600 degrees. I have an extra light here this to bring out a little bit of detail, so I'm not in total shadow. That is 5,600 degrees Kelvin. So again, a bluish daylight. And in the way background there, I put a light on, and it's just to fill in the background a little bit so I'm not in a dark shadow. That is a tungsten bulb at 3,200 degrees Kelvin. So what that is doing is it's adding some warmth. And that's because we're daylight balanced, and then that yellow looks a bit yellow. If I was balanced at 3200 degrees, these lights, the window and everything would look blue, and that light in the back would look neutral, and it wouldn't have any yellow. So that's a really important thing in the idea of color theory and color balance, and that applies for photography and for videography, video imaging, is that you need to figure out what the sensor color temperature is going to be based on the lights you're using. So that's usually a situation. So if you're outside, we go daylight balance because we're outside, the sun is always going to be your strongest light. You can also be inside, and I'm daylight balanced because I'm using windows and I'm using lights that are daylight balanced. And that's the fun thing. So you can be inside and daylight balanced. And then you can still have mixed sources. So you can create different pools of different lights. So if I'm tungsten balanced, for example, that light is going to look neutral. But if I put a daylight light bulb, which you can buy now, those cool, they're called like a cool white, and they are usually balanced at around 5,600 or 5,000, that's going to look bluish. So these are really interesting concepts to think about. And here's a chart that gives you this idea of where things can go. So you can have a warm white, you can go further lower on the spectrum, so 2,700 degrees, and then you can go really higher to go bluer and bluer. And that's the whole idea. And then there's like a cool white, and I think they go in between. They're about like 4,000 degrees Kelvin and stuff. So you can really see what you're getting. Now, here's the really important thing, and this is the great thing with digital technology, is that now what we see in our viewfinder, so the actual LED panel on a photo camera or on a video camera, what you see is what you get. So if I'm seeing a bluish image, that is what's happening. In the past, when you loaded film, everything just looked neutral and great because you're just looking through single lens reflex. So you're looking through the viewfinder is going through the lens, but that viewfinder has no filtration unless you put a filter on the top of the lens, but it's just seeing a neutral image. So it looks great. Then you get your photos or film back and everything's blue. Shoot, you used the wrong color temperature or you didn't then filter it appropriately. So a lot of things can be fixed, so you can still do different filtration, but with digital imaging, we can just do this in camera and change that color temperature. It's not embedded into the sensitivity of the sensor. The sensor is basically can be any kind of color temperature. So not only can we just change it from tungsten to daylight, we can go super warm, we can go super cool. And this is where we can get into further image manipulation in our actual sensor and in our actual devices. So our photo cameras, our DSLRs, our digital single lens reflex cameras, or any kind of digital photo camera can change color temperature. It could be anything. So I can intentionally make things really blue. So I can make things like a really cool image. So let's say we're shooting something like winter. So winter still seems to be around us here in the South Georgian Bay region, and just snowing yesterday. And so if it's snowing, I can get that image, but I can make it super blue in the sensor in shooting it. So I can already make that happen. I don't have to post-process, so I can pre-process. I can do this kind of, use this color science and ideas in the cameras as well. And so that's really, really interesting. So yeah, that's the idea there of color temperature. And that's kind of our, pre-processing, figuring out what our image should look like, how we're going to capture it, what we're going to do with it. And I think that's always of interest. What can we do with our images? What can we do with the color? What can we do with how we're pre-processing it and making those decisions? And if there's mixed temperatures, we have to understand that, like I said in here, the background has that yellow tungsten light bulb. It's going to be yellow. That's okay. We can have mixed temperatures. You just got to decide, do you want me to, if that's yellow in this daylight here, I'm going to look bluer and that one's going to look more neutral. That's okay too. Again, a different type of look, different type of tones. So here we get into tone and mood. So the different colors can alter the tone and mood of the image. So, the colors can make things ominous, like cool. A cool color can make things ominous and scary. And then warm things, warm colors like yellows, reds can make things really comforting and cozy. And that's really important to remember. So if you're trying to make something that has more of an ominous and scary kind of look, let's say, it's more of like a thriller, or it's something that you just want to make scary, or if it's something that you want to make really feeling cold, like I said, with a snow scene, you make it extra blue, that is what you can do with more cool. I can also take a photograph of snow, and there's some really interesting paintings that have done this too. I always find there's some really beautiful Canadian painters that captured snow, and they do a lot of warmth, like the sun hitting the snow, which is really interesting how it's kind of has yellowish tint of the warmth on the snow and the trees and the brown hues and stuff in the snow. So instead of making it really cool, it makes it a kind of a comforting and warm feeling snow. So you can play with these opposites. Same with inside. So warm, again, by me having that backlight that's a bit yellow, it looks a little bit warmer, inviting. I don't look like it's very cold in here. But if I had it all color temperatured blue, set to like a blue spectrum, you'd feel like, again, it's cold in here. I can make it extra warm in here, and and make that work as well. So it can be very warm, very super warm, and that could be used for effect. So we want to understand tone and mood with color. It can greatly affect what people think of your image or of your video, and the same kind of ideas can apply to digital illustration, using those same kinds of color spectrums. What are we doing? The warmth and the cool and this kind of idea. So again, everything that we're doing with digital arts, we can see right away. We're not having to print later. We're seeing stuff on our screen. We're seeing images on our cameras, our photo cameras, our video cameras. We're seeing these images right away. So we don't have to wait till later to get things back from like processed in a lab with photos or with film. We see it right away. So it's that instantaneous ability to see things that can really help lend itself to more experimentation. And this is what I really encourage. You can try different color temperatures. You can try using different things in the pre-processing or in your image capture, during your image capture, because that could be really fun and exciting to try it there versus the post-processing. And so, it's always worthwhile and a real good exercise to try some things out in camera, and what you see is what you get. So if you're seeing something that looks really something that's blue, that is how you captured it in camera, and that's great. And then you can further post-process it after. But that's the thing too. Try experimenting using these ideas of color theory in your image capture. So you can pre-program things. You can, set yourself up to create a certain look ahead of time. It doesn't have to all be done in post-processing or in post-production. So, it's just a lot of things to think about, and also that instantaneous ability of digital arts technology, of the idea of what you see is what you get right away, not having to wait for like a day, an hour, a week to get things processed from a lab. You're seeing things right away. So that gives you a real hands-on, quick, informative idea. So you can try multiple ideas, multiple color temperatures with photos or with videos. You can set your mood and tone early on. And then you can still do further post-processing. So post-processing in photography, this is the great technique. And if you've joined us for some of our other workshops, we've had different multiple workshops in photo post-processing, image manipulation, and also in our graphics and everything. So this is kind of one of those, this color theory workshop here. We're trying to look at how does everything kind of relate to one another? And that whole idea of the red, green, blue, that applies to our digital illustration as well, photography, video. We're doing the same ideas. So if you get used to, and if you get really, if you start to really excel in your post-processing of photography, you can really take that into your video color grading. It's the same ideas and same skill set. So it's really good that, just because if you learn something for photography, you can also then use it for video. So you can then apply those same ideas, techniques in film and video as you did in your photography. And that's a really great thing, that this is a cross medium, and you can take it into the other fields of digital arts. So the post-processing in photography, it's the technique of taking a digital photograph and adjusting the color and image properties to create a processed image that is different, enhanced, improved, and it has a creative concept in a final post-processed image. So we're processing the image. So we're taking an original image and we're processing it to do different things. Main areas of processing or post-processing the image are in the exposure, so making the image brighter or darker. Then we also have the HSL, which is a real primary area, and that will apply to video as well as we get into that, but hue, saturation, and luminance. And that's always really cool because you can apply a lot of this idea of hue. So what kind of hue in the color spectrum. So, if, let's say you add more blue or green, right? You're changing the hue, the color type in the overall image. Saturation, how much color is there? And luminance, what is the the actual brightness quality of that image as well. So the luminance. Saturation, we can go to 0, we can make it black and white. We can go, double it, we can make it super saturated. So we can have that kind of 60s look of a, Ektachrome kind of Kodak film look. So that could be really neat too. That's kind of the idea there. Then you can get into color tones, so we can just adjust, so if there's too much green, we can take away green, that kind of idea. Then we have our curves, and that curves feature is something that really translates well in photography and also in video and film. So let's look at Affinity Photo. So again, this is a software that you can access at the computer labs through our Creator-Space project at all the libraries. And I'm just going to get into Affinity Photo. So I've opened this up here, and here is Affinity Photo. So it's just like, it's a low-cost alternative to Adobe Photoshop. So there's no monthly subscription fee. It's just a one-time cost. I believe it costs about $70 now as a program one time, and you get upgrades and everything. But again, you can totally access this through our Creator-Space lab computers at all 3 library partners. And there's also an iOS, so an iPad version that is about $25. And so that's, again, you can do your photo post-processing directly on the iPad. So it's a great tool. And the real cool thing is that whatever you learn on the desktop version, the iPad version is very much identical. It just uses a little bit less menus and things, but you can, it's really identical, and that's the cool thing. So, okay, so let's look at here. So I got this image here, and then what I can do is I can do some manipulation to it. So I can figure out, okay, well, what do I want to do to this? So, we can play around with, there's auto contrast, auto colors, and things like that. I can also I'll go to adjustments. So here's where we can go into, we talked about white balance. So I can make things warmer, right? So here's my white balance. So now I can go, okay, well, let's make it cooler. You can see I can make it very, very cool. I can make it super, super warm. So this starts to look like winter, for example. And it's kind of a foggy day on a Blue Mountain here. And this is really warm. So I can change that white balance. Then I can also change the tint of where that white balance is going, and it goes from there. So that's a really, this is a really great thing of what we can do with post-processing. So let's go kind of on the warmer side. We're kind of hoping more for spring now. Then I'm going to go to the HSL, and I'm just going to go to and you can see now what it's doing is I'm getting these wheels here. I have a hue shift, I have a saturation shift, and a luminosity shift. So let's see what we do first with the hue. It's kind of similar, but we can really make things into like purple, magenta. We can make things into very blue again, right? So we can make it even warmer. So I can say, okay, let's make it a bit warmer. And then I can take all the saturation out, so I can go black and white. So that's always interesting. I can make it super saturated, so I can make it like, really, really orange like that. And then here's my luminosity. So then here you're basically bringing up the brightness of the image, and you can see it's starting to fall apart in the pixels and things. But I also make it a bit darker. So something like that. So this is how the really cool things you can do in the post-processing with something like Affinity Photo. And let's go back to layers. And what's really cool is all of these are shown as an adjustment layer. So I can turn these off and go back to my original image. And then I simply turn them back on, and I can get my layers back on. So it's really cool that we can do that in the adjustments. So I'll go back to my adjustments. I can now go to, let's look at exposure. That's a really good one. So exposure, I can change how many stops. So I can make it, again, brighter. I can make it a little bit darker. I can change the exposure. So let's do that. Then we can go to brightness and contrast. And again, we can make things brighter overall. We can make things a bit darker. So it's similar to the exposure. And then contrast is basically spreading it out so that it makes the darker areas darker and the brighter areas brighter. So less contrast gives you kind of a flatter looking image like this. And then more contrast can make it really vibrant like that. So it's, it adds a few things, but it's really pushing the area from the darkest dark to a brighter area. So that's that one. Then we can go to, there can be the curves. So this one's always really interesting. So here's the curve line. And there's different ways to do it, but basically you can put, wherever you click, you're gonna get like kind of dots on it. So usually what this middle area here is your midtone. So a lot of common thing is something called like an S curve. So you're adding a little bit of midtones. Then what you're doing is like you crush the darker areas like so. You can see it kind of looks like an S, and then you can also take down the highlights a bit if you want, or you can bring them up. So you can see how you can do these kinds of curves. It can be really interesting too. And you can play with, midtones being really dark, right? And creating like really interesting cloud surfaces. And so a lot of really interesting manipulation. So that's what we can do. So that's one idea. Okay, so let's go to layers here. And I'm gonna go to another image that I have here. So this one right here. Same idea. Let's go to exposure, and I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to say, okay, let's make it a bit darker. Oops, I don't think I got to get onto this image here. There we go. Okay, so here let's start with the curves. So we have, okay, so same thing. Like we can make a lot darker. You can make really nice dark areas like so. Okay, and then let's go to exposure. So again, maybe we want to make it a touch brighter. And I'm going to go to the HSL, and let's go kind of black and white. That could be really interesting. And maybe I'll just have just like a little bit of color. You can see how we can play with, the colors in the sky, right? We can make it kind of like red and so on. So we can really play with the imagery of what we're doing, and, and making it just like black and white, and, white balance, that same idea there. Brightness, contrast. Let's go here, and you can see here is that real contrast where I can make the dark in the trees really, really dark. And it's really fun. So digital image, and it's starting to look really like filmic, right? So kind of black and white. Again, a million ways you can post-process this. And this is the really fun thing, is that, being able to do that. And these are your main basic things. So just these adjustment layers, and that's it. And then again, they all show up here, which is really great. So we can turn these all off, and we go back to our original image. But you can see how we've, shaped it and contoured it, and it makes it for a really interesting image in that post-processing environment. So that's how we can do photo post-processing, and that's using the color theory, so we can change the colors, change the hues, and then the same idea then applies to video, which is really an interesting idea. So let's get into, I'm gonna just get out of there, and I'm gonna open up my DaVinci Resolve, and we have some, I think I have some clips here. Let's see what we have. Yeah, here's some clips here. And I think here's some like color correction ideas. So this is kind of, how things are shot. And, so I take this in here, and now what I can do is, you can see we get the similar kind of ideas. We get these color wheels down here, and then we're able to, showcase, do curves and things like this. So we can again I can do curves, just like what I showed you before. So we can do curves. We can play with contrast, so we can add more contrast. You can see that. I can reduce the saturation, right? I can minimize it. And then we have something here. We have lift, gamma, gain. And think of this as your midtones, the gamma, the gain as your highlights, and the lift as your shadows. So shadows, midtones, highlights. And then what we can do is we can bring up the highlights like this. Then I can say, here's our color wheel, so red, green, blue. And you can see if I say, okay, there's too much red, I can move it over to the cyan, and you can see you can make it a little bit bluer. And then I can update the midtones, and I can say, okay, well, maybe I want to add a little bit of warmth to the skin tones. So you can see I go a little bit to the red. And then maybe the shadows, I want to bring them down a bit more. And maybe I want the shadows to go a little bit greener, like that. So that's how we can post-process our image. And what does that look like? And we can see that this is where we're at. where we're at with it, and then we can you know, kind of look at, okay, here's like an original image there and to here, right? This is what we've done to it, right? So this is our original, just the raw image. This is what we've done to it. So you can see how we can quickly adjust the shirts and the things like this. And then we can do some really intense, you know, manipulations too. We can, you know, make things really, you know, X-ray like, and we can make things, you know, again, really, we can make it all blue, and you know, that can be really fun. So we can, you know, all of a sudden we're making something like blue, right? So that whole idea. So this was just brown, you know, before. And I'm just going to reset the node grade, and there it is. There's just a flat brown, and this is what we did to it. We can go totally blue and create that whole look and that whole concept in the you know, in the post processing, and you know, being able to create different things. You know, so again, we can have these extremes: black and white, warm. These are just some preset stills I have up here. So this is the whole thing, and this is really, I think, important. Is I'm just going to zoom in down here. Is this, again, these color wheels are very much the same as, you know, what we talked about is, you know, we got red, blue, green. So if there's too much red, you just pull to the opposite. And this is our whole idea, is that we understand our color theory and the color science is that we're moving around to the opposites. And this is how we can do our color grading. So by moving things around here, I'm able to, again, go make his shirt greener, and you know, adjusting the contrast, and it makes a very different looking image, right? So from warm to kind of green, creates different tone, different mood, and it's making it slightly unnatural, but it's also maybe for a creative context. Same with this this wooden shed door, right? Makes it, why is it blue? Whatever reason, but we can create that tone. So now it's cooler, ominous, you know, and it's very different than its original look. And that's really the whole beauty of what we can do in this post-processing of images and color, and, you know, making it all work and using things again. So this is the idea of, once we understand color temperature, the color science, red, green, blue, and that whole idea of what we can do with manipulation and in the processing. So again, pre-processing in camera settings, then the post-processing of the image, right? We understand all of this, then we can start to use it in a creative way. So it's not just about, you know, we can also just be like, okay, I just want to have everything neutralized and for it to look natural. Perfect. That's a creative approach. I want to not affect the image. I want perhaps the story, it's a documentary or it's a photograph. I want that image to be natural and exactly how it is. That could be your creative approach. I'm not saying that you have to always post-process, but you want to understand how, then using this theory and this idea, how do you get that neutral, natural looking image? Again, wrong color temperature will make things too blue, too yellow, and that kind of idea. You want the waterfalls, you want to capture the green of the moss in the waterfalls, you want perfect daylight balance and getting that exact image, you know, as you saw it. So that's really important. Now, this is the beauty. As artists, the way we see things will be different too. So maybe I see that as more of a misty, warmer waterfall that's, you know, I'm not seeing the green as much. And maybe I'm seeing, you know, kind of orange in the trees and the barks, and I want to bring the orange out. And that's my vision of that area. And this is where we get into digital arts and using that color theory. So that's really the exciting part of being able to do that. So again, you know, being able to use the manipulation and figure things out. So, you know, going warm wood, you know, neutral, and black and white kind of wood as well, right? So we can create these very quick and different looks. So very neutral looking, these shots, right? And this is much more processed and different. You know, and we can, again, make it very dark and very contrasty and whatever we want to do. And down here, we'll see this is the red, green, blue parade. And this is showing me in the overall top brightness and darkness where the colors lie. So this is telling me that this image is bluer and less red. So there's less red brightness, but there's more blue brightness in the overall image, and green's kind of in the middle. And then, you know, this kind of image, look, they're almost even, but it's telling me there's a little bit more warmth. And this is the cool thing about these kinds of scopes, they're called. It helps us understand what we're doing. So if someone says, hey, that image looks a little bit green, I can say, well, technically, this is saying that it's a little bit warmer and there's less blue in it. So if anything, it's on the warm side, but it's not on the green side. Whereas when we went to the other shot, you'll see this shot here, the blue-green are higher than the red. So it's definitely on the cooler and green side than this image here that's higher on the red side. And then a totally neutral shot, is pretty balanced. So this one's pretty neutral. It's pretty balanced. And look at this one. Look at the blue, how high this blue is. And the green and the red are totally. So this is clearly hot on the blue side. There's more blue in the image than the other two colors, red, green, and blue. So that's the whole idea of that theory and understanding what we're manipulating for bringing things up, bringing things down, and where they kind of lie in that range and how that can work. So it's a really interesting and unique idea of using science, creativity, but understanding that. And the best thing is with digital technology, we can see these results right away. So we're not just doing this manipulation and then having to print it and wait, again, some time. We're seeing the effects right away on our screen. And in case you're not sure, hey, maybe my computer monitor looks always a little bit warm, that's how we then get into the science, the scopes, that like down there in the video here in DaVinci Resolve, where it really tells us this is clearly blue. So you're seeing blue, I'm seeing blue, the scopes are seeing blue. So there's definitely no, there's no debate over the fact that this barn door, this shed door is definitely blue. And same with this image, there's no debate that it's definitely on the cooler green side than it is on the warm side. I'm seeing that. And we know that the science of these scopes is seeing that as well. So that's really important to give yourself that check. If you want to make things really blue, you should see that advancement in this parade here where the blue goes up. That's how you know that you're achieving the results, definitely, technically, scientifically, of your creative decisions in this color theory idea. So that's really the cool thing. And there's a lot of, most of it is just, trial and error. We can also define, it's also nice to kind of define here, like what post-processing is for color grading. So post-processing is, color grading is what post-processing is for digital photography. So just like you use Lightroom, Photoshop, Affinity Photo, the color grading that I just demonstrated allows you to adjust the same ideas. So color balance, saturation, contrast, brightness, quality, color of the video. And we can also get into some other post-processing things, but right now we're really looking at color. So having color, reducing color, shaping the color, what things, the midtones and so on. So let's remember, let's kind of review that whole idea. So we have our highlights, our midtones, and our shadow area. That curve can help us shape the different areas in there in terms of their exposure and levels. We can change the saturation, no saturation, more saturation. We can change the hue, the luminance, so the brightness, the type, the hue offsets of the color, and we can change our color temperature in the post-processing, which is always really neat. So we can actually change what the color temperature is of the shot in video and in photography. So it's all really, really cool ideas. So yeah, so now the main thing is just to go explore, get some photos, take some video. The video can be from anywhere. You can take it from your phone even, bring it into Resolve, and try some of these techniques out and think about what the color theory and how it can work. So this is really something to think about from before you start taking images all the way through to when you finish mastering them and doing that. So think about color theory is not just a post-processing thing. This is something that you think about for pre-processing, post-processing, and most importantly, now that you know an idea of all the color theory concepts here, the main thing is to figure out why you're doing something. What is it doing to help tell your story or your vision, your creative vision? So using the science and the color theory into better helping you tell your creative stories through digital arts. So again, thanks for joining me. My name is Tom Strnad, lead digital artist of the Creative Space Project. Just want to thank you for joining us, and then thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and then we have our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Be sure to check out the available workstations, the iMacs that you can get at each library that are loaded with Affinity Photo, Blackmagic, DaVinci Resolve Studio, so you can try all of these techniques out there. We also have Canon 6D photo cameras at all three libraries, and at Blue Mountains Public Library and Wasaga Beach Public Library, we have the Blackmagic pocket cinema camera 4K kits, so you can take those out for video as well. The Canon 6D cameras, photos, and you can do video, so you can use them for either to capture some images, try out the different color temperatures in the pre-processing, and then try out some post-processing. So be sure to join us again. We have more sessions coming up, and you can always go to our website, tbmcs.ca, to check out our YouTube channel and other offerings that we have. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.